All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time. Um, Real quickly, before we start diving in, can everybody hear me okay? I want to make sure you have your chat boxes open. It should be on the right-hand side of your screen. And if a couple of you could just chime in, can everybody hear me? I want to do a quick sound check. Can everybody
I
hear
can
me?
hear you great.
Awesome. Great, Kimberly. Thank you so much. Okay. So, you guys, thank you so much for coming. First off, again, my name is Katie Mild. I am with the Coldwell Banker team out of Colorado, and I met many of you during the Wealth Builder series. And the first thing I want to do is just wish each of you a huge congratulations and thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to come to Wealth Builder. I know. Again, I did your job. I was an agent. I know how hard it is to run your business consistently, day in, day out, and grow it. And for you to take a full day out and come and dedicate time to your education. It means so much. It meant so much to all of the speakers. I know it means a lot to your leadership team, and I hope that you all had some incredible takeaways from it. So with that, I'm going to dive in. A couple of ground rules before we go in. First thing, this webinar is recorded, just so you guys know that, and it will be available after. So if there are people who you know wanted to attend today, and for some reason they just couldn't get on, spread the love, make sure they get the link. I would love for them to hear what we talk about today. And then, of course, make sure you use the chat button, or chat box, excuse me, on the right-hand side. I want this to be interactive. I'm going to be asking some challenging questions as we go through today, and I want you to answer. I want you to contribute. It adds to the group dynamic. So please utilize the chat box. When we're going through everything, make sure you keep yourself on mute. Everybody knows that background noise can sometimes get a little distracting when someone forgets to press mute. And then the last point, as we're going through the exercises today and I'm asking for contribution, keep in mind, this really is a judgment-free zone. Okay, I'm going to be pressing you. I'm going to be asking you to really think about some tough things, and that whatever your answers are, that's okay. Please feel free to share. No judgment zone here. We're all trying to grow and get better together. So with that, I'm going to dive in. And then real quickly, if some of you can just chime in, can everybody see the screen I'm sharing? The cover where it says Building an Unbreakable Mindset. Can everybody see that? Let me get this chat. Awesome. Perfect. All right. So let's just dive right in. Everybody remembers what I talked about, hopefully, at the Wealth Builder Expo. Now, for some of you, if you're coming in from Salt Lake City, I met with you guys over a month ago, which is hard to believe. But for my Chicago crowd, I just saw you on Monday. So the Wealth Builder team was hard at work, traveling the country for the past month, giving our speeches. And here's just a quick refresher of what I talked about. Remember, I wanted you to have 5 takeaways. 5 things for you to think about on your individual money journeys, wherever you are on them. The first one was, of course, understanding and really diving deep into your money scripts, your money memories, the things that you tell yourself, and the things that you may have processed maybe in your childhood, maybe more recently, but things that have influenced the way that you approach money, the way that you approach how you manage your personal finances. The second takeaway was minding the gap. And remember, there were 2 elements to this. I wanted you to understand your gap number, which is the difference between expenses and your income. And remember, the gap was that space in between where the magic can really happen, where you have unlimited potential. And then the other element of that was calculating and understanding your net worth. And then takeaway 3 was identifying your bluff, your bottom line up front. So using your net worth numbers, using your gap numbers, really honing in on what's the bluff, what's the one thing that when you fix it, 10 other things will fall into place for you. Takeaway 4 was building your FI tribe. So once you have your gap and your net worth and you've identified your bluff, how can you build a tribe of people around you, of people who are going to support you, who are going to be there with you? And if you recall, the FI tribe was 3 different buckets, and it was answering the questions of where are you going, who are you with, and who are you going to help along the way. And again, just as a reminder, for those of you just joining in, so happy you're here. Please make sure that you put yourself on mute as we're going through, and I really appreciate it. And then guys, last but not least, knowing your why. Understanding your unbreakable why, the thing that's going to light you up inside, really just light a fire in your belly and get you going. So understanding those 5 takeaways and looking at your own money journey, I just have one question for all of you. How many of you have actually implemented any of these takeaways? And go ahead and use the chat box. Tell me if you've implemented any of these or given any thought to any of them. Maybe you have been super motivated and you've tackled all 5. Maybe you have a little bit of work to do. So chime in, tell me a little bit. All right, so I'm seeing a yes, a not yet. Keep them coming. Keep them coming, guys. For those of you who maybe haven't had time to implement, 2 things. The first thing I want to say is take a deep breath. It's normal. It's normal, and I'll get into that in a minute. What are the reasons that you haven't had time yet? Is it a lack of time? Is it fear? Is it maybe you don't know where to start? Because I know that we were given a ton of information at this seminar. So what maybe are some of the reasons that are holding you back from starting looking at the takeaways? A lack of time, great. I love that, okay? Laura said, I took notes, met with financial organizers cohesively, all my investments. Awesome, Laura. I love seeing that. Met with my financial advisor yesterday. Kimberly said her gap in net worth, fantastic. Fantastic, keep it coming. What are some of the other reasons? Working on next year's goals, great. The idea is to implement ideas that we just haven't finished yet. Totally understandable, okay. So, and if you think of things as we're talking, please feel free. I'm gonna be monitoring the chat box the whole time we're on this webinar, and I would love to hear your input on it. So, when I said earlier, take a deep breath, it's normal. Here's the thing. We all go to these seminars and we usually leave them with the best of intentions, right? We leave fired up, we leave super motivated, we leave ready to take on the world, ready to do a complete 180, ready to just be the new and improved person. And those intentions are fantastic and I love it. But here's the thing, we understand that life happens. And sometimes if we don't make the time to really sit down with those notes and do the takeaways and force ourselves to implement, even take a baby step a day at a time, what's gonna happen? Those notes get folded up, they get put back in your notebook, and usually get put back on the shelf, okay? So today, I want you to pull those notes back out if you have them close, pull out some paper and a pencil, and I want us to cover a couple of things a little more in depth. Okay, so today's agenda. Can everybody still see my screen okay? Just give me a quick yes in the chat box. Perfect, great. All right, so today's agenda. We're gonna take about 30 minutes or so, and I wanna do 2 exercises. The first one is I wanna do a why deep dive exercise. As I talked about in the seminar, one of the things that I do is I teach a 2-hour in-depth why workshop where we go super, super deep with a group of people, really digging into their motivations and the psychology behind those. So I want to take you through one of the exercises that we do in that workshop. Then the second thing we're going to do is an exercise that I call level setting hangups. Because truth is, we all have hangups. Even when we're super motivated and ready to attack our goals, we all have things that we tell ourselves. We all have those scripts, right, that hold us back. So I want to help us dig into those hangups a little bit and level set them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of my coaching, and then I want to open up to questions. So let's dive right into the why deep dive. So one of the things I talked about in the talk, of course, was knowing your why. And I shared with you a couple of my whys from when I started the real estate business and then my current why of my daughter. One of the things I want us to do today is I want us to dig into one of yours. The memories and scripts of our life shape our why. They shape our current motivations, whether we realize it or not. So we have to dig really, really deep together, and we have to ask ourselves the tough questions to sometimes understand what's really happening when we're creating a motivation. So the questions I want us to answer today are, do you really know your why? Has your why changed over the course of the past month or year? And does your why need an adjustment? Maybe you're onto something and you can feel like it's motivating you, but you don't fully understand the depths of it. That's what I want us to start clarifying today. So one of the things that I pull out in my workshop is the why pyramid, okay? And the idea of a pyramid, of course, is that you have layers and blocks that are built upon each other. Oftentimes when we're crafting a why, or if someone asks us why we want something, we tend to focus on the shiny surface. So just taking this hypothetical example, in real estate, we often set very physical, tangible goals. And one of those goals, especially with realtors, because we spend so much time in our cars, is when I make $100,000 a year, or when I sell this high price listing, I'm going to get that new car. I'm going to get that Tesla that Adrian was talking about in his accounting talk. I'm going to get that new Escalade. I'm going to get that convertible I always wanted. So let's just take the car as an example. That would be something that I call the shiny surface. The surface Y would be, when I make this, I want this. So then the first question, if we put the car at the top of the pyramid, we just start by asking simply, well, why? Why a car? What does a car mean? And typically in our society, what does a car represent? It's a status symbol, right? It conveys wealth. It can convey a certain socioeconomic level. It conveys status. It conveys a certain level of, I've made it. And when you've reached something like an I've made it level, when you've reached status, what are you really seeking? What's the why behind that? Typically, it's a form of acceptance. And if we keep working our way down the pyramid, well, why do I need acceptance? Do I have a lack of love in my life? Do I feel like acceptance will give me more security? Or maybe I'm super goal-oriented and I need recognition. So getting that car recognizes the efforts and the work that I did to sell that home. And that takes us down to level 5 then, the million-dollar question. Why do I need to feel love if that's what it is? Why do I need to feel security? Or why do I feel the need to feel recognition? And then this is the hardest part, because this is where I want you to dig even deeper and identify the reason for why you need to feel what it is. Usually, when you get down to this base level, the reason you identify, that's where a breakthrough of recognition really happens. That's where a breakthrough of identifying a script you've been telling yourself can come through. So to give you another example, I want to tell you guys a story that I didn't get to touch on in the speech, but I'd love to take you through now. And I hinted at it a bit, and I'll dive into it deeply now using my own Y pyramid with my story. So one of the things that I talked very briefly about, of course, was my daughter and my need to always contribute to my daughter's college and for her to always feel a sense of security. When I dug deep in asking myself why, for me, the symbol of being able to pay for some of her college, it's providing her with something that I consider to be a duty of mine. My duty as a parent is to give something to my daughter in the form of college education. I feel as though I owe this to her. So then the question becomes, well, why do I feel like I owe this to her? And when I thought about this question, for me, college meant growth and a level of security for her. And that led me down to my base level 5, the million-dollar question. Why do I feel the need to provide college money for my daughter? Can't she figure out her own education costs on her own? And there are lots of ways to pay for college, right? Couldn't she figure out some way on her own? When I sat with this story and really thought about it, my own personal college story came out. You see, when I was growing up, my dream was to go to the University of Notre Dame. From the time I was 6 years old, that was my dream college. I told all of my teachers growing up, I told all of my friends, I followed the Fighting Irish on TV, I watched the football games, and I just knew one day if I worked hard enough, I would get into this amazing school. And one of the stories that I was told growing up was, if you work hard, your goals will happen. And so I got to work. I made the straight A's. I was active in all the extracurriculars. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. And I worked really, really hard. And I was so excited to learn my senior year when the acceptance letter came and I was accepted into Notre Dame, my dream school. I had done it. However, it was only then when I realized the other side of the story. When the financial aid packages came in from Notre Dame, it became very clear that there weren't going to be a lot of scholarships. There wasn't a lot of financial aid given. And sitting around the dining room table with my parents it was late March, and I had only a few weeks to decide if I was going to be going to the school or not. We sat down, and it was time to talk about the money that my parents had supposedly saved for college. And my friends, I was very sad and disheartened to learn that there was very little saved. My parents had been hoping I would get a full scholarship, because they had not been saving over time like I thought they had been. So for me, my own college account, I was surprised to find out at the very end that there was nothing there. And on one level, I felt betrayed because I thought I worked so hard. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I thought that this money would be here. When I dug even deeper into that, the real issue that I felt was I wish I had just known earlier. See, I know my parents had worked hard, and I knew that they did the very best that they could. I just wish that they had told me the story earlier. I wish I'd had more time to apply for other scholarships or figure out alternative routes for college money. So now, taking the story and some of the things that I felt back then, I pull it forward into my story of my wife for my daughter, and it's twofold. The two lessons and the two takeaways from it are, one, I have an active account for her now, and we've started saving for her at a very young age. But the other side of it, the more nuanced side, is that we have to have a dialogue. And as soon as our daughter is old enough to really understand money and the dynamics of it, we'll be teaching her about money education from a very young age. We want her to be a partner, an investor, if you will, as part of her college education. She'll know the stakes every year as she gets older and older, how much we've saved, if there's a gap, and we'll work with her to help fill it along the way. So that's just a sample of my why pyramid, a story of mine to really dig deep and understand influences from childhood and how they impact your whys and your motivations now. So now, we touched on this a little bit. Again, my feelings of betrayal wasn't about the money. It was really about the lack of transparency of what was and wasn't there. So we talked about those takeaways. So now it's going to be your turn. I want you guys, I'm going to take 2 minutes right now. I'll get a timer going and some music going in the background. I want you to take yourself through a why pyramid exercise. And it's going to work like this. In the top pyramid, you're going to put what you think is the shiny surface. Is it a car? Is it saving for a vacation? Is it getting out of debt? Is it adding one more listing to your pipeline this year? Whatever it is, I want you to put it in the very top triangle. And then all you're going to do is ask yourself the question, why for each layer. And I want you to dig deep. I want you to think about what your surface, the shiny surface, means in terms of a symbol. And then I want you to think about what it feels beyond that. And I want you to dig deeper. My only rule for this exercise is this. My why pyramid had 6 different layers, okay? And yours can have 6 or even more. At a minimum, I want you to have 4 layers. You don't have to have 6, but I want you to have 4. I want you to ask yourself why at least 3 times, because with each subsequent why, you may uncover some feelings you didn't even realize were there. So now I'm going to set a timer, 2 minutes. I want you guys to walk through this exercise starting now. All right, everybody come back to me. It's already been 2 minutes, hard to believe. Does anybody want to share? Anybody want to share? And if you don't, that's okay. But if anybody wants to, quickly tell me yes in the chat box. All right, that is okay. I understand that sometimes, oh, I've got one volunteer, Charlotte. All right, Charlotte, can you unmute yourself? If not, I will. Here we go. All right. All right, Charlotte, can you talk? Oh, Charlotte doesn't have a mic. Okay, that's okay. How about we do this? I see Kimberly has one. Kimberly, I'd love to hear from you. And while Kimberly's sharing, Charlotte, if you want to type in the chat box a little bit about yours, and I'll be happy to share with the group.
Okay, hi there, Katie.
Hi, Kimberly. Thank you for joining.
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't miss it. This is really incredible. And I love the digging deeper. So one of my whys is, which is really funny. I've never really explored it any deeper, but it's a really big deal for me as a mom to be home for dinner and to take my kids to school. And when you go down, when you go down when you go up, my mom was always there for me growing up. So she was always, home when I got home from school and, took me to school and was just always really there as a mom. So I think I set that expectation of what a good parent is. And as wonderful, I mean, she was a stay-at-home mom, PTA president, she was that mom. And so I think not realizing now that I have my own kids is falling into that guilt mode of I wasn't that picture perfect mom that she was for me, and I had put that on myself. So then I went deeper on, how that made me feel and, feeling safe and cared for and provided for. And then going even deeper on, that makes a really good parent, and then I went from there on. Actually, it made me change my thought process around, well, just because I'm not home every single day after school and take them to school every single day, and I'm not home every single night, I'm still a really good parent. And so it kind of shifted that guilt of what the picture perfect parent is, and made me realize that, the choices that I make going forward, I can definitely serve that why and be a very, very good parent. And I have made some very big decisions around why it's so important. It's so strange, Katie. It's the being home for dinner every night is like this undeniable, critical, important thing to me as a parent. But just now doing this exercise, it's like, why has that always been such a critical thing to me? And it's almost like that, I know it probably sounds silly, but it's like that foundational definition of what a good parent is. I don't know. I don't know if this is making sense, but it really kind of just helped me understand why that is so important to me and how I can be a good parent in my own way, and serve my why at the same time.
That's awesome. No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. That's awesome. And a couple of things that you said in that. One, and this is a great point for the group. So Kimberly took herself through that exercise, right? And took the seeming surface of being home for dinner and digging deep really when she thought back, right? That was the idea or part of the idea of the quote, picture perfect mom. But what I loved is by her being able to identify that in her pyramid, she already flipped the script because she's able to say, you know what? My idea or what I grew up with a picture perfect mom, I'm doing something different, but it doesn't make me any less of a great parent, right? Your children, your daughters get to see a different side, a different example of a fantastic mom, a fantastic parent, right? So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. The other thing that you said that I thought was really interesting, I think the whole group, that we should focus on this. You said, I know it sounds silly, but so often, don't we all say that before we say something that's actually really, really important to us? We all are guilty, I think, of saying, I know it's silly, but if you find yourself thinking that, but then expressing something from your heart, it's not silly at all. You've just hit the nail on the head of something that's incredibly valuable to you. So trust that intuition, trust that. There was nothing silly about what you said, Kimberly. I think that was a beautiful example. So thank you. Thank you so much. Before we go on, because I promised Charlotte she could share, Charlotte doesn't have a mic, so I will just read what she wrote. She said, our shiny surface is working towards passive income that will support us in retirement. Awesome. Both of our parents are very successful and have never had money issues, and it's nice to have them. It is nice to have them being able to not be a burden to anybody. That's what we want. I love that. Yeah, I love that. Here's what I want you to do, Charlotte, and here's what I want everybody to do. This is a fantastic start. I want you to dig a little bit deeper, and I want you to think about. What does it mean to never have those money issues for your parents, but then also what does it mean for you to be able to pass that same gift onto your kids, your family when you grow older. So think about that. That's just a takeaway for you. But I love this. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful why. So Charlotte and Kimberly, thank you both so much for sharing. That's awesome. So what I want you to take away from this exercise for everybody, whenever you are identifying or you're getting that feeling of you have a why, a new motivation surfacing, take yourself through the pyramid. Ask yourself why at least 3 times. Remember, we want at least 4 layers to this pyramid. I want you to work it down and keep digging. It's awesome. Okay, so then given the time, we're going to jump ahead to the next element that I wanted to touch on today, which is level setting and identifying hangups. So we all have internal hangups. We all have these, again, I talked about it in the speech, these scripts, right? These things that we tell ourselves that hold us back from our dreams and goals. So what I want to talk about today is identifying yours and what are you doing to control them and get them under control. So here are just a couple of ideas to know if you're telling yourself possibly a limiting script. Things like, I could never do that. We shouldn't. Or maybe play it safe, go with the safer option. Or here's one of my favorites. Has anybody ever seen someone who seems like they're doing really, really well? Maybe they got that new car, or maybe they were able to adjust their hours at work, or maybe they just closed that $1 million listing. How many of us have heard the words, must be nice? So here's the thing about that one. Must be nice implies that you wouldn't be able to achieve something like that. Must be nice, even if you had no idea, it's actually a limiting thing that's holding you back. So I want us to walk through a couple of these hangups, these things that we tell ourselves, and figure out how to work around them. And we're going to do this. Oh, well, before we get into the exercise, here are a couple of questions I want you to keep in mind and answer as we're going through. What are some of your biggest demotivators or fears in the business? What are some of the little things in your life that detour your success? And this last one's actually a pretty powerful one. Do you have an all or nothing mentality? This one we see, I think one of the best examples or analogies around this is actually a lot of what Billy talked about in his health and wellness speech, right? When we are talking about eating well, when we're talking about exercising, how many of us have ever started the day saying, this is it. This is the day that I'm going to cut out sugar, or I'm only going to have that 1 cup of coffee, or I'm just going to have maybe 1 cookie. And then maybe you have the 1 cookie and your whole day's derailed, right? Your whole diet's derailed. And before we know it, you've eaten a bag of chips, you haven't worked out at all, and you've just completely spiraled. That's a great example of an all or nothing mentality. And interestingly, we can apply an all or nothing mentality without even realizing it to our personal finances or to our business finances. An example of this could be, let's say that you're in credit card debt. If you have debt and you're overwhelmed by it, you may be at the mall and you see a shirt that you want to buy, and you may think, well, what's 1 more shirt? What's 1 more meal out? I'm already in debt. So think about some of these things as well. If you have an all or nothing mentality, is it holding you back in terms of making progress on the goals that you want to achieve? So the exercise that I'm going to do for this, often we find that we don't even start things because we're so afraid, because we have that all or nothing mentality. So I want to take you guys through a quick exercise. This is a scenario exercise that I run with many of my workshops. It's just called the worst case scenario exercise. So what I want you to do right now, I want you to think about your number 1 business fear. Let's limit this just to your real estate business. Or if you have another side business, think about that. But let's not think personal finances for a minute. Let's think business only. What's your number 1 business fear or concern? And I want you to write it down. And then I want you, and I don't talk like this a lot, so pay close attention. I actually want you to tease out the worst case scenario. I want you to think about 3 steps, 3 bad things that could happen if the absolute worst possible outcome happens around your fear. Okay? And then for each of your worst case fears or steps, I want you to write down the counterpoint. So I want you to write down what you would do or how you think you would handle the problem if your worst case fear came true. So I know that might be a little confusing what I just asked you to do. So let me show you an example. Let's just say this is the example. I just had my last closing and it was a great closing. I worked really hard with this client, but they were the only client in my pipeline. And now my sales funnel is empty. And as realtors, how many of us have been there? It's not a fun feeling. So let's just say hypothetically, if we let the fear get the best of us, if we started to spin out, maybe that first level, scenario 1, maybe you're thinking, oh my God, what if I can't find another client for 3 months and I'm going into the holiday season? That's the worst possible time of year. What am I going to do? And then inevitably you might think, well, then how am I going to pay my bills? If I can't get a client for 3 months and I don't have a closing for 4 months, how am I possibly going to pay my mortgage? And then if we're still spinning out, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I have to leave the real estate business. I can't possibly do this anymore. So that's just an example. Now, if I write these down here, we have the fear scenarios on the left. Now on the right-hand side, let's think about the counterpoints. So let's say worst case scenario, I can't find another client for 3 months. Here's a few possible solutions that you could do depending on your business model. Maybe you use the downtime to reorganize your business. It's end of year. It's a great time to catch up on your admin, get ready for tax season. Maybe you're behind on your continuing education credits. And so this would be a great time to go enroll in an education course to keep your license current. Maybe since it's slow, it's a great time to experiment with new lead sources. Maybe there's something you've been wanting to try and you just haven't had time to get to it. This could be a great time to experiment. Or maybe, let's say you've had a fantastic year and things have slowed down. Maybe it really is time to take a vacation. Maybe you really have earned a little bit of rejuvenation. So book a vacation and come back rejuvenated and ready to hit it hard. So those are just some possible solutions or things to think about for the first scenario. Let's say number 2 happens. Well, how am I going to pay my bills? Some of those solutions around that could be, now's a great time. If we know something's coming down the road, go ahead and start stacking up your emergency fund now. If things get really dire, consider some life hacking options. Can you rent out a room on Airbnb? Can you take on a roommate? Now would be a great time to reconfigure your budget. Are there things that you can put on hold for a bit? And then finally, if your worst fear comes true of you're thinking, maybe I have to leave the real estate business, there are some possible solutions around that. Maybe it's time to look at a team within your brokerage. Maybe there's another agent who you can partner with because they have strengths that you don't, and vice versa. Maybe you create a partnership. Again, maybe this is a great time to reconsider your client sources and reallocate how you're spending your business time. Or maybe look at some other spinning plates of income. Maybe there are some other alternate revenue sources within real estate. Maybe there's a way that you can up your referrals, find other agents to recruit. Maybe you could work on REOs or BPOs. So what I want you to do, I want you now, we'll touch on this and then we'll go back to the exercise. The reason for this exercise is this. So often when we envision the worst case scenario and we let fear take over, that's when analysis paralysis sets in and nothing happens. And when nothing happens, we're not helping ourselves. When we take the time to think through worst case scenarios, but if we think about them ahead of time in a more controlled environment, it can actually be incredibly empowering because you're taking back that control of something. Now, if you've identified a legitimate concern, it's a great time to draw up an action plan and start to prepare now. But oftentimes, we'll find that these concerns really are irrational. And if we realize that, it's a great opportunity for reflection and to ask ourselves where the fear is coming from. And then it all goes back to our scripts and it all goes back to a why pyramid. Do you guys see how it's all connected, right? So much of this business, so much of our success really, really does happen in our minds. It happens between our ears. So by playing out the worst case scenario now, you can take control. So now what I want to do, I'm going to go back to this other screen. Again, we're going to take 2 minutes on this one. I want you to think through one of your fears or a worst case scenario. And again, play it out, what could happen, and then I want you to think about possible solutions or how you could anticipate or head off some of the worst case fears. So we'll take 2 minutes now and we'll start that right now. All right. It's been 2 minutes already. Okay, so and rather than asking someone to share their full worst case scenario, any just quick takeaways, using the chat box, any takeaways from this? Was there anything that you guys identified in here that maybe you didn't realize before? Did any of you identify an irrational concern? Anyone? And again, that's okay if you don't want to share. I always just like to put it out to the group just in case. Okay. So again, when you're facing your fears, when you are evaluating something and whether it makes sense for your business, whether it makes sense for your personal finances, sometimes when that fear starts to take over, I want you to stop, take pause, and I want you to think through a quick worst case scenario. And again, remember, thinking about it in a controlled environment can be so empowering to you guys because you take back that control and you don't let it spin out. So with that, I'm going to jump right into an introduction of my coaching. So one of the things that I do offer is a sprint coaching element. And I wanted to open this up to this group. So this cycle is geared entirely around designing your 2020, focusing on your personal finances, your business finances, and kicking your planning into high gear. I call it sprint coaching for a variety of reasons. The idea is that it's 5 sessions over the next 5 weeks. It's hyper-focused, it's very, very quick, it's evolving content, and it involves continuous and personalized support, both from me and from an online community. This session that I'm starting and kicking off starts next Thursday. The dates are listed here. It's 2 sessions in November, 3 sessions in December. We are skipping the week of Thanksgiving because it's a holiday. Go be with your families and enjoy. It's a group webinar coaching, and the idea is to get immersive very quickly and kick your production into high gear to get ready for the new year. So this cycle, again, it's called Attacking 2020 Business and Goal Setting. The 5 weeks are going to be broken down like this. Week 1 is going to be diving entirely into your personal bluff. And remember what bluff is, your bottom line up front. We're going to be identifying the root cause of your personal goal and the pain associated with it for why we haven't achieved it yet. And we'll start setting an action plan. Week 2 focuses on your top business bluff. And again, identifying the root causes of the business goals and setting up that action plan. Week 3, we'll do a deep dive into your business and personal gap numbers and your net worth. And we'll be doing a deeper instructional dive into this so you can really understand how these numbers work. Week 4 is where it all starts to come together. We'll be using what I call 2020 hindsight to shape an unbreakable 2020 year. Okay, the idea is I'm going to be pulling your past scripts, pulling money memories, pulling the why pyramid and the why training into a really deep, immersive week for starting to create this incredible year. And then week 5 is the capstone week where it all comes together. That's where, using everything that we've learned from the previous 4 weeks, we create a personalized 10-step action plan to get you jump-started and ready to take on 2020. The sprint coaching cycle, again, it's 5 weeks long, a 1-hour webinar every week. Here's what you can expect. We have the weekly webinar accountability check-in, a private Facebook group for ongoing support and questions, thought-provoking, challenging content. Again, they're very immersive. I have high expectations and lots of things for you to do and work on throughout the week. There's a workbook included for your reference and reflection. And then the capstone, after the week 5 capstone class, we'll schedule a one-on-one call together where we'll go through your sprint, we'll go through your personalized 10-step action plan, and we'll tweak anything that we didn't get in the webinar together. So with that, again, here are the details again, and I'll be sending out all of the sprint coaching details there is a follow-up link that I'd love for you all to follow. So normally this course is $4.99, but for my Wealth Builder clients, I'm offering this at $3.99 for the 5-week course. I do offer a 2-session money-back guarantee. So what that means is if you come to the first 2 sessions and you're not completely satisfied, full refund to you, no questions asked, because I want you to get your value. I understand that this is a big investment and it's additional time, and I am committed to giving you the best content to jumpstart your 2020. And again, sprint coaching, hyper-focused. It's only 5 sessions. We dig in very, very quickly, very, very fast. Of course, there's no annual contract, not for a year, not for 6 months. Each cycle is only 5 weeks, so you're in and out and flexible. One of the other things I do is the content is constantly evolving. And I do that because topics routinely change. Our industry is routinely changing. We evolve, and my content reflects this. So every 5 weeks, you have the option to opt in for another sprint coaching on another topic. And then, of course, personalized continuous support. You have access to me and the group throughout the entire training. So what I'm going to be doing for next steps. First off, I want to thank you guys for coming today and spending a little bit of time with me. It's been about 45 minutes. It flew by. It always flies by. I love working on this with you. Next steps, I would love for you to sign up for the sprint coaching. It does kick off next Thursday. This link right here is where you can go to sign up. Otherwise, I'd love for you to opt into my weekly newsletter. Again, I'll be sending these links out again. I send out a weekly newsletter every Friday. If you would like a separate recording of this webinar, please email me at katie@katiemile.com. Just put webinar request in the subject line. I'll get this sent right out to you. And if nothing else, I would love to stay connected with you. I'm always available if you have any questions or have specific thoughts around building your money mindset. So please reach out to me on social media. Many of you already have, and it's been so fun to start getting to know you and connecting with you on a deeper level. I would love to continue those conversations, so please stay connected with me. And with that, let's do, I'll stay open for another couple of minutes, just a quick Q&A. Do any of you have any questions on the sprint coaching, on anything we talked about today, maybe my speech that I gave, that if we didn't get a chance to connect after that? Any questions or anything I can clarify for you? Anything else? And you guys had some great, comments. Thank you so much for participating on this. Any questions at all from the group? All right. Well, what I'll do, guys, I will stay on for just a few minutes in case any of you want to message me separately or ask questions in private. Thank you so much for taking the time. I will leave you with just this parting thought. We talked about this at Wealth Builder, and I will just want to reiterate it to you now. You always have the right to a dignified and an abundant retirement. But remember, guys, you have to go get it now. You have to get to work now. You have to lean into your education, find your FI tribe, know your why, and start changing your mindset now. Because like we talked about, a beautiful, abundant retirement does not happen by accident. It happens by design. And every single one of you has what it takes. You have the courage to make it happen. So go out and do it now. Thank you so much for your time.